Hey everyone, welcome back to the Collector's Compass, the official podcast of Collectors MD, where we explore the intersection of collecting, mental wellness, and responsible engagement across the modern hobby and beyond. I'm your host, Alyx, founder of Collectors MD, and today's episode is a really important one and a conversation we've been very intentional about. It sits in a space that doesn't always fit neatly into existing categories. It's about gambling harm, collecting culture, and what happens when behavior evolves faster than the systems meant to support the people within them. I'm joined today by representatives from our partner, Problem Gambling Coalition of Colorado, also known as PGCC, a state-level organization focused on harm prevention, education, treatment pathways, and recovery. With me today are Chigbo and Jamie. This conversation isn't about drawing hard lines or issuing verdicts. It's not anti-hobby, and it's not about labeling collectors or communities. It's about observation, what's changing, what patterns are emerging, and what PGCC is seeing on the ground as people enter support systems without always having the language to describe what they're experiencing. At Collectors MD, we believe collecting can be meaningful, connective, and positive. We also believe that when environments change, when speed increases, access expands, and friction disappears, it's worth slowing down and asking better questions. Awareness beats denial, support beats willpower, and precision matters when the goals are intentional. Chigbo, Jamie, I really appreciate you both joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Jamie, do you want to just provide a quick intro and high-level overview of PGCC and your mission?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Jamie Glick. I'm the president of PGCC. I am a clinician by trade. So I've been a clinician for over 20 years. I'm also an adjunct faculty member at the School of Social Work at the University of Denver, and really stumbled into this space during COVID. I had a practice targeting athletes and C-suite executives, entrepreneurs. And little did I know, by targeting that population, I would also start receiving referrals for problem gambling. I'm also a licensed addictions counselor. So my first assumption was, because I'm a licensed addictions counselor, I'm trained to handle folks who also have a gambling addiction. I quickly realized that that's not the case, that this is a specialized area and needs specialized training. And so I received that training, really got involved with the coalition and some of the projects that were involved in the coalition, and then became the president last year. The coalition has been around since 1996, really started receiving funding about 3.5 years ago through sports betting legalization here in Colorado. So that's a little bit about PGCC and generally, our history. Our mission is really to build awareness around problem gambling, to advocate for research, and then provide access to treatment for folks.
Yeah, my name is Chigbo Nzoiwu. I'm the director of programs for PGCC. I too also stumbled into this space. I call it a divine connection as it relates to my family experience and just kind of my professional track throughout the military, and then coming out and then working with troubled youth is what I previously was serving prior to landing this position here with the Problem Gambling Coalition of Colorado. And it's been a full circle for me. My brother had a challenge with gambling. He also collected comic books as we were young kids. His father had a big giant box of, what I consider original X-Men magazines, but we tore them apart as kids, of course. And I just remember that being such a nostalgic time for me growing up. But as we got older, my brother continued his collecting and his gambling and other challenges. And so, I feel like this is just a wonderful, full circle for me to be able to, provide services and care and time of attention for people of this population, and also for the military as well, and the great state of Colorado. So happy to be here. Really grateful to link up with you in the past couple of months, and proud of the work that you're doing at Collectors MD. It's really, impacting a lot of the people that come into the center as well as they have challenges with collecting. So a great intersection with gambling, what we focus on, and collecting in that space. So thank you, Alyx.
Yeah, thank you both. And, we're also incredibly grateful to you guys and, the broader team at PGCC, Maggie, Stephanie, everyone else who's been involved since the beginning of what we've started building together last year. Your care, your thoughtfulness, your credibility, all bring something really valuable to the work we're doing at Collectors MD, and just your openness, your willingness to engage and collaborate has made this possible to really explore a lot of the issues with the nuances and all of the harm that's going on in these sort of adjacent worlds to traditional gambling. So we'll get into sort of the details and the nuances of our partnership in a bit, but I do want to start with our first segment, which is PGCC's Lens, Traditional Gambling Today. And so, I'd love to start to ground this in some of the work that you guys have been doing from a public health perspective. So how do you define problem gambling?
Yeah, well, I think it's first important to define gambling. So we use the definition risking something of value in hopes of gaining something in return when the outcome is uncertain. And so I think that's important just to lay the framework just to begin, because if you use that definition, there's a lot of things that are gambling that we don't traditionally consider gambling. We do a lot of public speaking and we talk to folks, and when we use the word gambling, they think of casino, they think of Vegas, sometimes they think of sports betting. But they often leave out other types of gambling behaviors, including day trading, including gamblified collecting, gamblified video games as well. So there's a lot to consider when we use the word gambling. When we're talking about problem gambling, there's a couple of things that we typically see when it becomes a problem. We see people who are chasing their losses. That's a big indicator of problematic gambling. We see people using money that they don't have as a problem as well, and that's where a lot of people end up reaching out for help when they become in significant debt. And then, really, how do they feel when they gamble? How much time are they spending gambling? Those are also indicators of a potential problem. And so one of the first things that we do when we interact with someone is really to assess if this is a gambling problem or even a gambling addiction.
Really well said, Jamie. Yeah, and there are so many different industries and categories that have sort of taken page out of the playbook of the casinos and sports books. And you mentioned some of them. I mean, between crypto and day trading and, modern collecting, the modern hobby, you have blind boxes now with these toys that are targeted and geared for children. I've seen it firsthand. My 7-year-old niece got a Labubu for Christmas. It was Christmas Eve. She was, super excited, just ripping open the present. Looked at it. She was like, "Oh, I hope I get the blue one. I hope I get the blue one." Opened it up. It's brown. You see the look of just sheer disappointment, rush over her face, and it's like, it's a sad thing to see that they're conditioning these children at such a young age to become sort of engaged with this dopamine effect, this adrenaline, this thrill of the chase, and that's a huge part of the problem. Another area that is absolutely exploding right now is the predictive markets, right? And we're seeing that everywhere. Even on the Grammys this past weekend, Trevor Noah said something along the lines of, "Welcome back to the Grammys, potato." He just said the word potato, and it's like head scratcher. Why did he just say potato? He proceeded to say, "I just said the word potato because you could bet X amount of money on Kalshi that Trevor Noah was going to say the word potato at the Grammys tonight." And it was very tongue in cheek, and obviously just intended to kind of be lighthearted, but it goes to show that it's quite literally everywhere, no matter where you look. It doesn't even have to be sports content, right, for it to be in your face 24/7. So with that, what types of behaviors or harm have historically shown up most often through your programs and referrals?
Yeah. I'll jump in, Jamie. Historically, that's a broad kind of scope to view on. But my personal experience since starting with PGCC, the very first kind of client interaction that really impacted me and fueling my passion for this work is, people feeling suicidal. Again, first client in the doors as I'm starting, I'm getting to witness them coming down from engaging in gambling and being at super rock bottom and expressing to the team at PGCC that this is their last chance, their last hope at being around and feeling worth something. And it really it was a wonderful experience right out the gate, because I got to see really how harmful this space is, and to watch my team, watch Stephanie take care of this client that came in and really provide them a sense of hope. We were able to provide them resources to get them back on their feet, to get to their next meal, to invite them to some of the groups that we have at the center and really be a part of the community. It was magical to see. And, that's, I would say, the pinnacle of what we exist for is to help people, prevent going down that route of ideation and having thoughts of not wanting to be around because of the addiction and the challenges that they're suffering. But as far as like harms, I mean, that's the sky's the limit. The spectrum is all over the place. Some people view their experience with gambling and collecting as minimal. Oh, it's I can get it back. They see this opportunity to recover, so it's not that damaging. Some are destroying their marriages, their friendships, their families, all the connections where they're hiding from public. They don't even want to go to the grocery store because they're afraid they're gonna run into somebody they might owe money to, or a bridge that they burned. And when you get into those areas of concern, I mean, really the question is what harms haven't people considered, even to the point of even harming others to avoid conflict, right? And it's very fascinating to kind of see and understand where people are deciding to place their thought process and their actions when they get into this space. And so but Jamie, I'll let you add a little bit more to the historical aspect, as I've been with PGCC for a little bit less than a year, so I can only speak to my experience on that regard.
Yeah, I mean, suicidal ideation is obviously top of the list, right? Because we want to protect people, and the research tells us that 1 in 4 people with the gambling addiction will attempt suicide, which is important and should get our attention. But this is a financial problem, and so a lot of people who are reaching out have significant financial challenges, and then that's a ripple effect, right? So if you have significant financial challenges, you have kids, you married or in a significant relationship, that all trickles, right? And so we see challenges with mental health issues, family issues, financial challenges, hopelessness, and it's interesting too. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but when we work with people and they stop gambling, that's great. But there's actually a withdrawal that comes after, when people stop gambling, that we oftentimes forget about. And so we oftentimes will work with people and they stop gambling, but now they're feeling depressed. They have mood changes. They're not performing as well at the profession. And so, the work continues not just at the time that they stop gambling, but really beyond that, because of those withdrawal symptoms, but also the repair. We work with a lot of folks to repair family, repair their finances, and to really put themselves in a situation where they can move past this and really put it behind them. That's really the goal. And for many people, it'll always be a certain part of their identity because it disrupted their life so much. But at the same time, we want to help people to move beyond this.
Yeah, really well said. At the end of the day, I joined this mover. I created this movement and joined this industry, mainly due to my own lived experiences, but also because, when doing step work through the Gamblers Anonymous 12-step program, Step 12 talks about paying it forward and spreading the message to other people who might also be experiencing the struggles and the challenges that come with compulsive gambling. And I really just wanted to take my experiences, take my addiction, and kind of flip it on its head to help other people, to create a space that I wish existed when I was really in the throes of my addiction with both gambling and, compulsive collecting, impulsive spending. And so, yeah, just being on the front lines now and making a direct impact to people who really need help and support has been some of the most fulfilling work that I've ever done in my entire career. And so I've only been doing this for, just under a year. But, to have the support from you guys and the other, organizations and councils that we have partnered with, it has just been absolutely monumental to sort of come together to help people and, ultimately create a safer and healthier place, just doing the work for the greater good. So how does PGCC balance prevention, education, treatment, and recovery sort of at the state level?
Sure. Yeah, we try to be involved in all of it, for sure. I think that we end up being too heavily focused on treatment, and treatment is great, and we always want to answer the phone. We always want to help people, but we want to help less people, if that makes sense. And so that only happens through prevention and education. And so we want to be more involved in that space. We recently wrote a grant to be more involved in the prevention space because I think that is really important, especially as we're seeing younger and younger people involved in the gambling space. We need to reach people in high school, in college, and you can make the argument, even in middle school and in elementary school. I think going back to what you're saying earlier, Alyx, I think we've done a good job as a society destigmatizing mental health, but we don't talk a lot about gambling. I think there's still a lot of stigma attached to gambling. And so the only way that you destigmatize that is through stories like yours, Alyx, and people speaking up and telling their stories and talking about it more. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation because we don't talk about it enough. We do call gambling addiction a hidden addiction. It's really hard to know if somebody's struggling with that. And so the more we can talk about it, the better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why peer support is so incredibly important. We can't heal in isolation. We have to heal in group. That's something I learned early on in recovery. And, one thing that really stands out to me is how often harm shows up before people ever identify with having a real problem or, even the word gambling, and that gap feels really important, right? A lot of folks don't walk into a meeting for the first time and say, I have a gambling problem or I am addicted. They come in saying things like they're stressed or overwhelmed or hiding spending or chasing losses or just feeling out of control in ways that they just can't quite name yet. And by the time, the label catches up, the impact is already there. The damage has already been done financially, emotionally, through your relationships. And if we wait for the word before we offer support, we're often already too late. And so again, like destigmatizing the whole idea of addiction is really, really important because it removes that barrier that I think a lot of people are afraid to sort of climb over and look in the mirror and admit, and I might have a real problem, right? So creating these sort of judgment-free spaces and allowing people to not just share their own experiences, but listen to others and, become aware that there are people out there going through exactly what you may have experienced, that can be life-changing.
Yeah, I think we need more protective social norms in this space. I think that's really important. And so what I mean by that, just use an example, in the alcohol space, we have what's called a designated driver. And that was a tremendous movement in the alcohol space because it kind of normalized responsible drinking, right? So I think we need something similar in the gambling space, these protective social norms, these conversations that folks can have to normalize protection, to normalize responsible gambling if people choose to gamble. I think what you hear instead is like, buddies talking shit to each other about their losses and making fun of each other, and hiding and also hiding their losses from their buddies and only talking about their wins. And so you kind of see the opposite, right, of protective social norms. So I think that's a movement in our space that can be really impactful, is if we can get people to talk about it more before it's a problem, when it's an emerging problem, after it's a problem, because right now we don't really talk about it. And when I say we, I mean like these folks that are together, gambling, talking about gambling, text messaging each other about their picks for the week. We need more of those kind of buddy check-ins. Like, hey, are you good? Like, could you really afford what you lost this week? Like having those types of conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Chigbo, did you want to add anything there before we transition over to segment 2?
Yeah, thanks for asking. When you talked about the harms that show up before identifying the word of gambling, it just reminded me of an experience that I had with children. We all have cousins, friends, kids around in our lives. And if we pay attention, we might see some of these markers. And I remember years back when Roblox was kind of emerging and popular, and same thing with Fortnite, is, being around these young boys, that are like 7 and 5, and they're playing this game and they're trying so hard to get certain skins and certain guns or certain items in these games. And there's actual like monetary mechanics, or at least from my perspective when I was watching them, where if they had access to a credit card or something, that they would spend millions of dollars to get the item that they wanted. And when we look at the grand scheme of things, it's those that do have access to funds to to fuel their video gaming or collecting or gambling sort of behaviors, they are not, obviously they're children, they're not aware of the dangers of engaging in these time and time again, and how this fuels their addiction. And so there is a story here of a person who games with their son who's a toddler. And to me initially it's like, oh, that's wonderful, you're spending time with your kids, you're playing games with your child. However, they started recognizing that their boy is in the living room. They wake up in the morning and there's controller on their leg because they're waking up at 2 a.m. to play games. And it's like, that person cannot identify with the word gambling, let alone even probably say the word gambling yet, right? And they're already kind of addicted to some of these video game mechanics and that have gambling embedded in them. And so it's just, man, we're hitting the tip of the iceberg when it comes to like understanding, identifying the harms that show up long before gambling or video game addiction is even within the realms of the person, accepting that for themselves. So yeah, very scary stuff. Thanks for asking, Alyx.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing more and more of this across a plethora of categories, right? Obviously there's gaming and toys and sneakers and things that have been around forever. But with the card collecting, the hobby specifically, there really aren't any age gates. And you have this industry that's basically disguised as this nostalgic childhood hobby. And so kids get involved. Parents, just assume, oh, my kid's opening packs of Pokemon. Like, he's acting like a normal kid. But little do they know what's really going on within these systems, right? The live streaming platforms and, even the live card shows, in-person card shows. You see these kids walking around with these cases of cards, wheeling and dealing thousands of dollars in transactions. I mean, this is like real stuff going on every single day. And, we really just need to do a better job of not only protecting the youth, but also educating parents, getting them in, creating more touch points for them to become acclimated, become aware of what's going on within these systems. So with that, we're going to transition over to our next segment, which is what shifted, new patterns that PGCC is seeing. So over the last few years, what shifts have you noticed in the types of people entering the system, or, the behaviors being described?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, we're seeing younger individuals reaching out for help. We're seeing an increase in people who are being affected through some level of online gambling, it's digital gambling. So that's definitely a trend that we're seeing. And then we're seeing some of these new behaviors that we're talking about showing up. We're having an increase in people reaching out for day trading and treating day trading more like gambling. So we're seeing an increase in that. And then collecting is another one too that we're seeing. These behaviors in itself are not harmful. Day trading, collecting's a hobby, right? If we use our definition that we talked about earlier, risking something of value in hopes of gaining something in return when the outcome is uncertain, we know that collecting, especially if you're opening up a pack of cards that you don't know what's inside, that's gambling, right? That's neutral too, right? You're taking a risk. We take a risk every day. I'll take a risk walking my dog, after this podcast. That's a risk. Sure. But then also there's a point where it becomes problematic, and that's where we're really focused on. So again, it's like it's the time that people are spending. It's where's the money coming from? That's always important, right? And then gambling or spending money that you don't have and using credit is such a big risk factor. And then chasing is really one of the biggest indicators of potential harm. And so you open up a few packs and you're not really getting what you would hope, and you're kind of committed to a certain financial amount, and you need a return, right? So you keep buying. I know I worked with someone last year. It was the first time that I worked with someone as a therapist who was dealing with this issue, and she started off with this behavior in a healthy way, but it got to a point where she was only buying. And it was that rush really that she was getting from opening up these cards and really hoping for that big payout, right? Just like sports betting, just like a slot machine. And it really became a problem. And the problem increased when she ran out of money and took out a loan to buy more cards and to put a second mortgage on her house. And this was all without her spouse even knowing, right? And so it can go from call it harmless, you can even call it maybe healthy activity to harmful pretty quickly. So it's really important for people to understand, really what those signs are when it does become harmful.
Yeah, really well said, Jamie. I think a lot of what you're talking about, ties back to the traditional gambling term, going full tilt. Right. Mm-hmm. Especially, when you're playing card games like poker or blackjack, it describes that moment when emotions just take over, the logical decision making. Something goes wrong, frustration or urgency spikes. And instead of slowing down, a person or, a compulsive individual ends up doubling down. The bets get bigger, the decisions get faster, and the goal quietly shifts from enjoyment to, just that urgency, that sense of that needing that sense of relief or recovery. And that same dynamic can absolutely show up in collecting, right? A bad box, a missed hit, or a near win can trigger the urge to keep ripping or just jump into another break immediately. The thinking changes from, do I want this, or to, I just need one good hit, right? The spending speeds up, the boundaries soften, the guard, comes down, and the chase just starts running the show, like psychologically. And it doesn't look like gambling on the surface because, again, it's this childhood hobby, but the emotional pattern underneath is almost identical.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned all those things, and because these are all the things that we see in the gambling space. And people who with the gambling addiction will tell you sometimes they get to a point where they don't even care if they win, right? They don't even care if they open up a pack and there's nothing in it, because it's that anticipation that really kind of drives this behavior. And it's interesting too. You said a near miss, right? And I'd be curious what that looks like in the collecting space. I'm not really engaged in that space. I mean, what is a near miss in the collecting space? Is it like you think it's a certain card, but it's actually something else? Like what does that even look like?
Right. We have a question from the chat here. What recommendations do you have for parents to address and educate the kids?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question, but I think first and foremost, just being engaged in whatever behavior that is, I think is just really important, whether it be video games, whether it be collecting, having conversations about it, checking in about it. I think sometimes, especially with these behaviors that traditionally are not seen as harmful, we as parents, and I'm a parent, we often allow these hobbies to take the attention of our kids so that we don't have to pay attention to them because kids are exhausted. And sometimes we just like, oh, good. They're like, they're with their cards or they're on their video game. It kind of gives us a break as a parent. But, I think it's really important just to check in, to have those conversations, to be engaged if you can as well. If it's video games, hey, can I play with you? And you get a sense of like what's happening within the video game and you hear the conversations that are happening. If it's collecting, my advice would be to become engaged in that too, and sit with them while they're opening up their cards and kind of get a sense of like, does this feel like a still a healthy behavior, or does it look like that they're truly engaged at a more of an emotional level, and not using logic and reason that we talked about before, where this can become a serious problem. But you don't really know unless you're like engaged with it, but then also having those conversations.
Absolutely. And are you guys seeing more people who don't see themselves like as gamblers, but are still experiencing the same type of harm? Like, is that becoming more and more common?
Oh yeah. My experience in especially working with the younger population of gamblers and collectors is that often many of them see it as a side hustle, as a hobby. It's so normalized within our culture that many of them feel like they're FOMO. They're missing out if they're not collecting, if they're not gambling, if they're not on these apps, because they want to socialize. They want to be a part of the in group, or they want to be in part of the conversations that are happening around campus, off campus, and in the schoolyard or whatnot. And they don't necessarily see it as harmless. They see it as maybe an entryway into a broader social circle. And then when they see celebrities or other folks, or maybe even people within their networks win, and maybe they use that money to buy something of value that their social group enjoys, then it's like, oh, well, I don't have a job, or I'm not doing this, and this can be a way for me to access things, and they see it as a side hustle. And then of course, the data shows that they're not winning as much. They might get a couple of hits, and then that turns into just, as Jamie kind of mentioned earlier, is like talking crap about, oh, Jimmy lost $100 the other day, and oh, well, I won $20 here, and it's just kind of like a conversational topic of banter, but it's a serious issue. And so when folks, especially younger folks, like I mentioned, are coming in and they're talking about their experiences, they don't necessarily see themselves as gambler because it's been so normalized. They just know like they engage with this thing, and it's harmful at times. They isolate themselves at times, but it's just like in the moment, right? So yeah, that's a very interesting question there, as far as them identifying as gamblers. And of course, that's where screening comes into effect, where you ask the right questions, where you have trained professionals like Jamie and many others within our networks really just engaging with intentional questions to help these clients and these folks navigate towards that reality as being a gambler, or being a compulsive collector, or having a video game disorder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I would just add, when I work with people who maybe are not at the point where they want to admit that they have a problem, they sometimes will fall back on, well, I'm just bad at it. I'm just a bad sports bettor. I've had bad luck, or I made a bad investment. So it turns into more kind of like an internal failure. And so I have to oftentimes want to educate them about the system of gambling and how the system is really designed to work against you, right? And so, and most people lose more than they win. And so that's why we encourage people to look at gambling as a form of entertainment, not as a way to make money. I always tell people, don't quit your day job, because you probably are not going to be able to be a professional gambler. Yes, there's professional gamblers, but more than likely, I mean, there's also NFL players too, right? But more than likely, you're not going to be a professional gambler. So treat it as a form of entertainment. You're probably you're probably going to lose. And so if you're going to spend, $60 going to the movies and a dinner, I should say $100 because everything's more expensive now. But you're going to spend that money to, to buy cards instead, to sports bet instead. That's really what we consider a form of entertainment. Shifting your entertainment budget to one of these types of behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and when we talk about technology, right, the high speed velocity, the unlimited access, I mean, we're talking about 24/7 access, the frequency, what we're really describing is how much faster people can move from this state of curiosity or watching from the sidelines to being directly involved, without even taking time to think about it and then facing the consequences, right? Decisions that used to take, planning now can happen so easily in like a millisecond, right? Because the access is constant. The frequency, just means there's very little time for any sort of reflection between these actions. And that sort of compression changes the timeline of harm. People can get in so much trouble much earlier and with far less warning than before. And so this just feels like a moment where language, I think, is lagging behind the behavior, right? The tools, the platforms, and the mechanics have just evolved, but the words that people use to describe what's actually happening haven't really kept up. And when behavior doesn't match the labels that they need, it becomes so much harder for people to really truly recognize the risks associated with a lot of this activity, or to realize that what they're experiencing is something support systems already know how to address. We do have a quick question here before we transition over to our third segment, and this is from the same user that asked the question about parental recommendations. They ask, is your approach to working with neurodiverse people different? If so, what are things you do to help people or help those with ADHD, for example?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's a diagnosis that we see quite a bit in this space. And I would say generally, as you were talking, Alyx, about this digital world that we're in, I would say generally we're in an understimulated environment where everyone's understimulated to a certain extent. They're looking to be stimulated in some way, but even more so with people who meet the criteria for ADHD. And so, we do have to treat those symptoms as well. And sometimes first, because sometimes this behaviors that people are engaged in is because of this understimulation that they're dealing with. And so, we want to make sure that they are properly diagnosed. We want to make sure that they're receiving some level of interventions, that we want them to understand their own diagnosis. And so really understand what that means and know that I think it's important for folks with ADHD to understand that they live in an environment where they're often seeking stimulation. And so there's different types of stimulation you can seek, obviously, but how can you meet that need in a healthier way? And so, how do we treat those folks different? I think first and foremost, assessing for it and helping them to understand it. I would say most of the sports bettors that I work with meet the criteria for ADHD. They're always looking for stimulation. They're in professions that are highly stimulating. They drink a lot of caffeine, for example. They're chasing dopamine really all day. And so I think it's important to educate them on that and kind of what that means and how that connects also with their gambling behavior.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of things going on, in the brain that people don't even realize. There's so many different, mental disorders or, things that people don't even realize they have because they, for a number of reasons, they don't want to seek help. They don't want to, go get diagnosed or prescribed. They don't want to look in the mirror and admit, hey, something might be wrong here. I need real help. And so again, just providing that sense of awareness and education is so incredibly important, not to scare people into thinking they might have a problem or a disorder, but really more so, again, just to spread the awareness. And it might not be affecting you personally, but it could be somebody, you know, directly related, or somebody in your inner circle, somebody in your family that could be going through this. And, you know, it's just going unchecked. So all that stuff is just really, really important to keep in mind.
Alyx, I wanted to jump in here, interrupt you for a second, and kind of go back to the question you asked about how technology has changed the intensity of risky behavior real quick. And, you know, initially when we started, I talked about the impact of, you know, suicide and the suicidal thoughts, and why this is very, you know, important to me and PGCC and a lot of the clinicians in this space. Is one thing that we have to keep in mind with this digital age, especially with sports betting online and all these things, video game wise, is it's often in isolation, and or it's really quick. And I want to draw this comparison with, let's just say, other substance abuse and use. Is it might take a couple days for them to, let's just say, kind of wean off or detox, and then get into this depressive state. Like, oh damn, I did all this damage while I was on substance. I said this to this, I did this to mom, dad, all these things. Whereas, you know, you lose 10 grand, 100 grand instantly on your phone while you're, you know, laying in bed, or, you know, driving home from work. You know, as we heard from stories, it's like you hit this wall of, you know, shame, remorse, depression, like, oh shit, scenarios instantaneously with this digital age, right? And so that's where some folks, when it comes to sports betting or gambling or engaging with this virtual forms of addiction, you know, they get to that suicidal point oftentimes a lot quicker. And so it's hard to catch, you know, and right. I just wanted us to make sure that we understand that too with that question, is like how technology has changed risky mental health, right? Behaviors, not just risky behaviors as far as engaging with the gambling or the collecting. It's like risky behaviors as in self-harm. Often it comes to people a lot faster, from what I've experienced from the stories that I've been told on both those with virtual addictions and those with substance addictions.
Yeah, and these environments, they've just become so frictionless, and it's so easy for somebody to spiral, because hey, you could join a live stream, again, be a bystander, and then suddenly be sucked into a break because there's one team left, and you know the breaker, who's really operating as the dealer, is, you know, sort of creating that sense of FOMO, that urgency, like you got to get this team, it's such a great deal, and then suddenly, before you know it, your thumb is hovering over the bid button, you bid, and then for a moment you're like, why did I just do that? And the countdown, sudden death auction, is about to hit 0, and you're thinking, oh, I hope somebody outbids me, I don't really want this, you know, this team in this break, and then you win it, and then suddenly you're again on this slippery slope, this tilt, because you know you ended up buying something, got nothing in return. Now the knee-jerk reaction is just to continue. Again, it's just the 24/7 access, the frictionless environments. It's just become very, very dangerous for, you know, the average consumer to participate in these sort of high speed, high intensity, just relentless sense of urgency type of environments, because, you know, it's just really, really dangerous. So we're going to transition over to our next segment, which is the overlap where collecting enters the conversation. And we've already touched on this quite a bit, but we've focused on some of these other areas like gaming, but I really want to hone in on collecting. So collecting itself isn't gambling per se, but some collecting environments, again, now mirror the gambling dynamics. So when you first connected with us, and I'll let Chigbo answer this because, you know, he, you know, was part of the initial calls that we had to really help build this partnership. When you first connected with us, what felt familiar from your perspective?
Yeah, well, we already had a few folks in our community who, you know, let's just say got into gambling through their collecting habits from the past, and they've shared their stories. We like to get to know the folks in our community and their stories, and when they do share it, you know, some of those stories begin in their teen years or young, you know, adulthood, collecting cards, collecting shoes. I've even heard collecting purses. even tools, having garage full of tools even, and then they, with the hopes of selling those things eventually. Some of those stuff, like, they hold on near and dear, and they're priceless, they'll never sell. Even connecting that to the fact that it's so valuable that they don't want to sell it, and they're holding on to it like stocks or real estate. And so, like, in speaking with some of our clients or some of the folks that frequent the center, many of them saw it and see it as a side hustle, which is kind of what we talked about earlier with the sports betting and stuff. It's like, it's a means to make money, and they did. They often, got a valuable card, a Pokemon card, or a valuable baseball card, or a rookie Jordan or something early on in their, collecting careers, and flipped it or sold it, or saw the value and realized, like, oh crap, that was easy. I can continue this. And so that behavior then, invites them, let's just say, into other avenues of side hustle or gambling. And that's where it kind of spirals out of control. And so the fact that we already had a few collectors in our community that had openly shared their experience and opened our eyes to this world was just a no-brainer, that we need to, present something for this community and make sure that they have education around it, some guardrails, or at least some support and recovery for that, because not everybody identifies with the sports bettor. Not everybody goes to the casino and gambles on tables. Not everybody collects, but we need to have support around all these things that are dangerous to our mental health and to our livelihoods.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talked a lot about how a lot of these patterns do go unchecked. However, there are people that are recognizing it before they even know that Collectors MD exists. And we know this because you guys have gotten the calls through your hotline. You've had people join your rooms, but we also have partnered with 800 Gambler, which is, the main hotline for problem gambling. And people call in all day. They've told us firsthand, people call in all the time. Hey, I'm not addicted to casino or sports betting or anything like that. I'm addicted to ripping packs. I'm addicted to joining breaks. And, they're like, we don't really understand what that is or what, that entails. And so, again, that's why Collectors MD is so incredibly important, because as we continue to see the evolution of these industries, as they tap into the traditional gambling mechanics, the education and the awareness and, the training is really, really important. We want this to be a collective effort across the entire recovery ecosystem. I'm only one person. Collectors MD is only one organization. We need to be at the front lines in partnership with PGCC and all of the other councils and coalitions at the state level that are helping, really be there for people when they're at their lowest of lows. So why do you think it's so difficult for people to recognize risk when it's wrapped in, hobby language or nostalgia?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I'm actually surprised that people have reached out for issues with collecting and day trading and those other types of non-traditional gambling. Because there's not a lot of education out there. There's not a lot of discussions out there about those types of behaviors and how it could be considered gambling. And so it really makes me wonder how many people are struggling that haven't reached out for help. And so I think we have a responsibility, and that's why I'm so grateful for you, Alyx, and Collectors MD, because you are on the front lines of getting the word out. But I think we all can do better. Speaking the language. Helping people to understand the potential risk of these behaviors, because we haven't done that and people are still reaching out for help. And so my guess is this is just a small percentage of people who are actually struggling, the people who've already reached out for help.
Of course. Yeah. And that's a part of, my unrelenting passion for growing this movement. It's not about scaling Collectors MD from a social perspective and, getting followers and clout and engagement and all of that. I know firsthand, as somebody who has been immersed in the hobby culture for 5-6 years. I was a big sneakerhead throughout my 20s. So collecting has been rooted in my DNA for pretty much my entire life. And I know firsthand that there are thousands, tens of thousands, maybe more people struggling with this with these issues, and people are talking about it. It's not like it's going unnoticed at this point. There are influencers, there are content creators in the hobby that are talking about the gambling like mechanics, the harm, the harm going on, the risks associated with a lot of the behavior, but nobody's doing anything about it, right? There wasn't a tangible destination for people to go to seek help. Well, now there is, right? Collectors MD weekly peer support meetings, Unbox powered by Collectors MD. We have real touch points, real environments that people can now come to get the help that they need. And so, yeah, I mean, look, that tension between enjoyment and harm, it seems to be where a lot of people just end up getting stuck. You know, something can still feel fun, familiar, maybe meaningful, even as it starts to cause stress and financial strain or emotional fallout. Because, you know, it isn't all bad. It's easy to dismiss the warning signs or tell ourselves, you know, we're just overthinking it. It's not that big of a deal. You know, I was opening packs when I was 6 years old. You know, that gray area creates a lot of confusion for people. People don't know whether to trust the enjoyment they feel or the discomfort that's quietly growing alongside it. And when there's no clear language for that middle space, many people end up just staying longer than they initially intended to, because they're unsure of when fun is sort of quietly turning into something much heavier, much darker.
Yeah. That's why I love, Alyx, your groups and Unbox that we've launched at PGCC months ago, is because a lot of people are coming to these groups with different experiences. Some folks are collecting cards, some folks are collecting shoes and other items, some are collecting memorabilia from TV shows and all, and you really get to understand, like, oh, this world is so wide, and I thought collecting was this, I thought gambling was this, and then you're able to understand it from a different perspective. And for that parent out there, the one that was asking the questions, it's like, how do we, you know, catch these things? How do we understand? It's like, join some of these groups and you hear these individual stories, and then you could see, oh man, I never even thought about putting on this lens. We watch these TV shows all the time. We get the swag, we get the we get the items, the memorabilia, the figurines and all that stuff. And you realize that there's people out there that go hard in the paint in that direction, you know, and they're not fitting the traditional collector's, you know, staple of what that means, or the traditional gambler's, you know, makeup. Right. But they have a challenge, they have a problem. And these groups that are available, which are very few, and we hope to grow, you know, the community around this support, helps us really understand how deep this goes and how important it is to have support groups, and how important it is to welcome people with different experiences, even if it seems totally unrelated to my card collecting or this tool collectors or whatnot. So I really love that about the groups, is that people from all different experiences are coming and sharing, and we are growing as a whole, because so many folks in those groups are like, man, I never thought about that, and they're starting to see.
Yeah, I actually want to take a moment to pause here, because you sparked a thought, and it's something that I've been sitting with, you know, almost for a year now, since starting Collectors MD. And, you know, at the end of the day, I'm only human. You know, I experience real emotions just like everybody else. And for me, you know, it's just incredibly frustrating when something like compulsive collecting, just gets written off as like this stupid problem or something an adult should be able to control. And we see that all the time. I've been on dozens of podcasts since I started Collectors MD, and I've been in abrasive and combative environments where, you know, the host or the people in the live chat are like, what are you talking about? Just control yourself. You're an adult, like, make adult decisions. And that, you know, that framing just ignores how behavior actually works, especially in these environments designed, engineered to push speed, scarcity, and emotional decision-making. And when people reduce it to just a character flaw or a lack of discipline, it just shuts down the conversation and keeps people from asking and getting the real help that they need. And most of the people struggling aren't, you know, irresponsible or naive. They're just responding to systems that are intentionally optimized to overwhelm that sense of self-control. And treating it like, you know, a joke doesn't make the harm go away. It just makes it harder to talk about honestly. And so that's why, like, you know, just being like open-minded about this sort of thing. And you know, it's something I tell people all the time. I'm like, look, if you don't believe that this is a real issue, I encourage you to sit in on one of our peer support meetings. Be a fly on the wall. Sign up for one of them, sign the waiver, join one of our meetings. You'll see firsthand the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, and you'll understand, I promise, after 1 hour of sitting down in one of these meetings, of some of the horrors really going on. Real quick, I just want to give a shout out to a buddy of mine, Denny Cards on Instagram. He said, you do have an unrelenting passion, Alyx, and it is much appreciated. It's not just me. It's Chigbo, it's Jamie. There are so many other people that feel the way I do and have devoted their lives, their careers to spreading this message and to helping other people. That's what this is all about. It's teamwork. It's coming together as alliances and, just creating an environment for people to come to where they can feel heard, they could feel seen, they could feel loved with no judgment, no stigma. That's what it's all about. So this is a perfect segue to transition to our next segment, which is Unboxed, which is the Thursday night meeting that we have built together, which has been growing and evolving. And, I'm just so proud of that project and all the work that, Stephanie and Maggie have also been doing behind the scenes to really bring that to life. And so since launching Unboxed together, what have you guys noticed in the conversations that are showing up?
Yeah. Well, first off, just huge shout out to you and Maggie Owens for a lot of the work that you guys done connecting and really turning it into something wonderful and very valuable to the community. We're very proud of Unboxed, and we hope to, this spreads like wildfire across our nation, across our world, so that there's more support groups like this out there and available for folks, especially free of cost. And, one thing, I guess, shameless plug, but for all you guys out there listening, it's open to the public. You're more than welcome, just like Alex's Collectors MD meetings, to join us and have discussions around these topics. But it's a space where we can explore relationships around collecting. We're everything we do at PGCC isn't like taking a hard stance here, a hard stance there. It's like education, awareness, understanding, and then having the tools to navigate these spaces in a healthy manner. And that's what Unbox really focuses on. And we're sharing a lot of stories there. So, balance, having self-compassion, and recognizing ourselves within these spaces. So it's necessary to support people that are stuck in this cycle, and that's what we do. That's what our mission is. We're aligned for, is to be there for the community. And we introduced Unbox to continue the important work that you've started with Collectors MD, and to provide additional resources for responsible collecting community. And especially, like I said, many of our folks that had come to the center for, let's just say, their current gambling issues, shared stories about them collecting, and we have tons of those to share. And it's just not going anywhere. It's getting fueled up with platforms out there that we all know of, with Whatnot and all these other places that are offering opportunities for people to get engaged in this space. And we need to make sure that there are support measures as well, just like there is for everything else in this world when we go excessively down those roads. So very proud of our team, and very proud of Unboxed and Collectors MD work around this space.
Yeah, absolutely, Chigbo. Unboxed really just reinforces how powerful the non-judgmental spaces can be, especially early on when you're first going through it. And it's been beautiful to see people come together and support one another. It's not just me or Maggie or Stephanie, people running these meetings, sort of lecturing or teaching or anything like that. It's real peer support, people coming together, sharing feedback with one another, helping, lift each other up. We help, sort of guide it and navigate the conversations, but, it's really intended to be a collaborative environment for people to help one another, very similar to how a GA meeting would operate.
Yeah, I love how organic it is. It's not about this type of hobby space or this type of hobby collecting. We got people from all around the world who are talking about their different forms of hobbying and collecting and gambling, and they share their ups and downs. They share their immediate current event struggles. Sometimes, hey, I just went to a card show, or I just went to a collector show, and I saw this. I got triggered by this. I was online, and people were, talking about how less of a human being I am because this is my form of collecting, and I'm dumb. And like you said, just stop, or why do you even watch that show? And it's like, it's very beautiful for people in these groups when they open up and they share their emotion and their experience, and like we get to vicariously live through that and have compassion for one another, and then also just really learn and educate ourselves around this, because like we think we might know what gambling is, we think we might know what video game disorder or collecting is, and really until you speak to the community and you open it up to folks with a variety of challenges, you really don't know what you're talking about. So that's why I love these groups, and they've really expanded my understanding and compassion for people out there in this world.
Yeah, and Unbox is really intended to be an additional touch point for our community members who just want to stay engaged with their recovery. Of course, we encourage people to check out Gamblers Anonymous meetings in your local area. We can help direct you to those if you need guidance. But beyond the Collectors MD weekly peer support meetings that we host every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, you can now join these Unbox meetings every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. They're hybrid, so if you happen to be in the Colorado area, you could check them out in person too. You don't just have to join virtually, but we do have, for those listening on our audio platforms, we do have a flyer that is pinned up to the screen right now with a QR code that will direct you to the link to join the Zoom calls on Thursday nights. So if you want to learn more about that, you could check out collectorsmd.com. Just go to news and announcements, and that's where you can find this flyer. I believe it is also on your website as well, but all of the information will be in the description below, so you can check it out anytime you need. But we welcome any and everybody. If you want to learn more about that, just let us know.
Yeah, I just also wanted to add one more thing, is that in Collector or Unboxed, we do also go over tools and techniques to help folks kind of navigate what they're going through. So we use, proven modality, CBT. We do mindfulness. We have all these types of exercises amongst triggering, coping. Aside from it being an open forum discussion group and support group, we also do try to utilize these tools that have been proven in the mental health space to help us actually have, a direction with it too. So that's one thing, very valuable part of Unboxed as well. But thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love the exercises that Maggie pulls for each week. We do things like urge surfing, and there's a plethora of different activities and exercises that we go through, and she has these worksheets and these modules, and it's just really, really well done, and it's a nice change of pace from our traditional weekly peer support meetings on Wednesdays. So we're going to continue that. We're going to continue to grow that, and I'm really excited to see the direction that heads in the coming months. So with that, we're going to transition over to our next segment, which is youth exposure and early conditioning. So from PGCC's perspective, why does early exposure matter so much?
Yes, early exposure is one of the highest risk factors for future problematic behavior. And as we know, there's so much early exposure to all types of things. Again, I have children, and specifically my son is involved in a lot of these behaviors that are fairly neutral behaviors, but gambling type mechanics. And so you think of video games, think of any arcade that a kid goes to, collecting, even the surprise toys that you can buy at the store, where you're buying a toy, you don't know what's in it, so you open it and you're surprised and you're hoping for that rare item, and even bingo. And I just want to share a story from last week. Took my son to a fundraiser at the school, bingo. Neutral on the activity, definitely want to raise money for the school. But they also have these pull tabs that you can buy as well. And I think pull tabs are kind of like lottery tickets, where you get four for $1, and you pull them, and you either win or you lose. And so I gave my son, I had a couple bucks, I gave him like $3 to buy some of these pull tabs. he ended up winning $7, and so he used that $7 to buy more, and he ended up losing it all. And like someone who is gambling, he wasn't happy with that because he had 7. He started with 3, then he had 7, now he has 0. And so he was so adamant about buying more. And when I say adamant, like he was like emotional, he started crying, and it was just so interesting to watch, right? Because this is a fairly neutral, innocent behavior for a back to school fundraiser type situation. But all of the behaviors that he was experiencing are the same behaviors that we see with people who are gambling, to the point that he lost all of his money and he was essentially going to chase. If he had his own money, he probably would have spent all of his own money. He didn't have any, fortunately, and I wasn't going to give him any more. But he had this like emotional reaction to losing this win that he had. And so it was just interesting to watch. And, I was talking to the principal and some of the educators, and they know that I'm in this space. And, I was even saying at the table that I was sitting at with a couple parents and kids, and I said to them, half joking, that one of the best things that can happen for our kids at this bingo table is for all of us to lose, because as you all know that when you have that big win, sometimes that's like the initiation to problematic gambling, because you start to gamble with higher amounts, and then you eventually lose it all, and then you want to try to win that back. And so so much exposure, and again, much of this exposure is neutral, but especially if you just look at individual behaviors. But when you combine them all, we have to accept that our kids are exposed to gambling like never before.
Yeah. And what concerns you when, this sort of chance-based or high risk, and high frequency mechanics show up in spaces that kids frequent?
It's it's this, as you all know, this mechanics of gambling that just continues to show up, and it triggers a response in the brain that can be very dangerous. Even when they lose, right? And so, one of these behaviors in isolation is one thing. But you throw in the video games, you throw in, arcades, which I hate arcades because I usually end up spending $50 for a $3 toy that they cash in at the end. But the collecting, the surprise toys at the store, the bingo, and there's other things that you can add to that list. Like they're just being inundated with these gambling type mechanics, and they don't realize it. Sometimes the parents don't even realize it. I just realize it because I'm in the space. We're at a local arcade. And I gave my kid one of the play cards that he can play with, and just kind of let him go play. And then I was walking around and I saw him rolling this big dice as a part of this chance to win this prize. And I was like, wait a second, I don't feel right about this. And so I had to bring him to the side and talk to him. But there's just so many opportunities for our kids to gamble. And like I said, it's like never before. And it's really training their brains to risk something in hopes of gaining something in return when the outcome is uncertain. And that's scary as a parent, but also as a professional.
Yeah. And you know what, this word might carry some negative connotations. So I don't want to put you guys on the spot to answer this, but Denny Cards on IG asked, some people even say that a lot of what we're talking about here is considered grooming. He asked if the guests can share whether they agree with that or not. Kind of a sensitive topic, so we can pass over it if you guys want.
No, it's fine. And oftentimes when I think about grooming, I think about what happens in these video game spaces is oftentimes, what I see. And I certainly, my son has told me some stories about some of these kid-friendly, using air quotes for the listeners, kid-friendly games where people can do bad things. And my son was playing one of these kid-friendly games, and he was essentially locked in a room with another person. And there were some bad things happening in this locked room of this kid's game, or at least attempted to happen. And he told me about it like a couple of days later, and it shocked me. And then my daughters were in the car too, and they said, "Oh yeah, we used to do that all the time." So it's like, what the heck is going on in these games? And going back to the person who asked the question earlier, like what can parents do? Like, I'm so grateful that we had the conversation in the car. Like it was after the fact, and so that was kind of a bummer. But we could at least talk about like protections and what happens. What can you do if that happens again? As far as like grooming for gambling behaviors, that is there a intentional effort by some system to introduce gambling to youth at a young age in hopes that they'll gamble as an adult? Probably. That's getting like, that's really getting into the weeds of like, conspiracy theories and things like that, but it certainly serves their interest.
Yeah, absolutely. So Danny, real quick, he clarified his question. I don't want to spend too much time on this because we still have a few more segments, but he said, I should clarify, not grooming by individuals, but by society and the industry at large, gambling as a whole, not specific shady individuals.
Yeah, and the industry as a whole, that's there are so many companies within the industry. So, it's hard to say that there's this concerted effort by the whole industry. Is there efforts by bad players? Probably, right? Because it serves the bottom line, right? So I don't want to say for the whole industry, that there's this effort, but I think that there's some bad players out there that, that certainly, from a grooming perspective, either promote it, allow it, whatever you want to call it, because these are future customers, 10 years down the road, right? So I certainly do think that there's probably some shady characters in this space that either promote it or allow it.
Yeah, I think for a lot of these platforms, I'll just say one thing, Chigbo, and then you could add your 2 cents. But I think for the platforms, the manufacturers, the industry as a whole, I think it's less so proactively grooming and more so allowing the behavior to take place and just kind of looking the other way, right? Yeah. They're not like going out of their way to say, all right, in order to earn more revenue, to grow our channels, our platforms, we're going to go out of our way to prey on children, but it's happening sort of organically. And because of that, there's real risk, there's real harm that's going on here. And they're not doing anything proactively to help the problem. Right.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good way to put it. And, even in the collecting space, and I don't know as much about the space, but people who are addicted to collecting, that serves a financial interest for someone, right? And, I hope that collectively as a space, just like I hope in the gambling space and even the gaming space, that I hope in the collecting space that there is people that are bringing attention to it. And there's a kind of a unified effort to say like, hey, it's not cool to make money on the backs of people who might have a problem.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing I wanted to add to Danny's point, and I think, my experience traveling the world, I spent some time in Japan, and the claw games and the coin games are very popular there. And one thing that I've noticed in the States as well as overseas is that like you'll have traditionally, let's just say, teenager, adult game systems, like the coins that stack up and you try to knock it down. Now you're seeing those machines outfitted with SpongeBob or Hello Kitty or something that really only a kid, when they see it, they don't actually see the game, they see SpongeBob. And then now they want to play the game because it's a SpongeBob game. It's not this adult, designed game to collect these coins. It's a SpongeBob game. And so I think, what Danny was leaning into is like maybe some of this packaging of these games, right? We're starting to see more predominantly teenage or adult games wrapped in a Pokemon or SpongeBob or something of that sort, casing. And in that sense, yeah, it can be problematic. And in my time in Japan, you would see some of these claw games with stuffies here and there at restaurants, just like you do in the States. And then, towards more kids geared areas. And then as they get older, the themes change and there's more for teenagers. And then now there's like I don't know, 100-yard square spaces, which are huge. I used to love going to them. I loved wasting money on claw games, but I knew that it was a waste of money. And I always went for the chocolate because I loved eating chocolate so much that I'd play those all the time. And yeah, it can get very problematic when it comes to these mechanics for kids.
Yeah, there was a word that Jamie used before that I hadn't heard before. I don't even know if it's a real word, but I like it a lot, and I'm going to start using it. And that was gamblifying.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of these platforms, like SpongeBob's a perfect example because, Fanatics just rolled out the Topps Chrome SpongeBob, and they have SpongeBob Sapphire and all these different variations now where they're, sort of pulling the heartstrings of children, right,
Mm-hmm.
to get them to engage and to, be involved in these product releases, which, by the way, you'd be amazed at how much a box of SpongeBob Topps Chrome goes for. As a matter of fact, you guys want to guess?
What is it? Like what is it? What is it? What is it? Like, it doesn't matter. What is it?
Card?
It's a card?
It's a box of cards with different characters from SpongeBob.
I don't know. $50. I don't know.
I mean, they just had that movie up there in the Grands, I suppose.
Hold on one sec. I'm going to share my screen.
We got a guest in the chat too. $700. That might be an expert.
It wasn't far off. I mean, obviously the prices vary from retailer to retailer, but like, look, there's a one of one here that's listed on eBay for $85,000. The Sapphire Doodle Bob. But yeah, the Sapphire box goes for, and this is like on StockX and these other websites where they're marked down a little bit. But if you go on like Whatnot or Fanatics or any of these live streaming platforms and check to see what the breakers are charging, yeah, they're charging upwards of $700 for, what is it, 8 packs of cards. It's crazy, but it's all reflective of the aftermarket prices of what a lot of these cards are selling for. And, the industry has really priced out the average collector. You can no longer, enjoy going to your local card shop and paying a fair price for a hobby box of cards because, they've just inflated everything. It's gotten out of control. And that's a huge part of the problem here. So, this just all feels like where education and guardrails matter more than, the absolutes. Most people aren't helped by blanket statements or hard lines that, kind of ignore the context. What actually makes a real difference is helping people understand, especially parents, understand how these systems work, what risks to watch for, and where their own boundaries are, and then building environments that support these boundaries instead of just constantly, testing them. And, things like guardrails don't eliminate choice. They make healthier choices easier to access. And education doesn't tell people necessarily like what to do, right? We're not trying to tell people like you have to do this or you should do things this way or you should, make this purchasing decision. It just gives you more information that you might need to decide before harm has a chance to escalate. That's what it's all about. And there are so many different tools and resources that you can access, both through PGCC and Collectors MD that will make, create a little bit more friction, allow you to take a little bit more time to make that conscious decision to purchase something. If you're spending too much time in one of the streaming apps and you need to slow down and you know very well that there's really no way for you to self-exclude like you can with these traditional gambling apps, you can now download Gamban. You could download Gamban because Gamban has added all of those streaming platforms as part of the websites and apps that they block. And, that is really helpful for a lot of people. If the industry isn't going to regulate itself, then we want to be able to offer those sort of third-party tools and resources so people can regulate, themselves. So with that, we're going to transition over to our next segment. We got 2 more. This is language, labels, and why being neutral matters. PGCC is, very careful with language, and honestly, Collectors MD is too. And so why is, coming from things from a neutral tone, neutral standpoint so important for state level organizations?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to be neutral on a behavior. Gambling is a behavior, and so we're neutral on the behavior. We're even neutral on legalized, regulated gambling, and that just shows people that we're not anti-gambling, we're not anti the industry. We actually want to work with the industry, and we do work with the industry to promote safer behaviors within these products. If we were just anti the industry, then we'd be in our little circles, talking about how we can help people, and they'll be kind of doing their thing, and there wouldn't be that collaboration. And so I think that collaboration is really what's going to move the needle, so that we're all speaking the same language. We're offering tools to people. Obviously, this is within a regulated market. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about this unregulated market that's really scary, and there's no protections, and people can't self-exclude and all those things. But at least within this regulated market, I think it's important to work together.
Yeah, well said. And what happens when conversations around harm become overly polarized?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely doesn't help anyone. And we disagree. With my conversations with the industry, we disagree on things, and I think it's important to be able to have conversations even when you disagree, because hopefully, I can pull them a little more in my direction, or we can kind of meet somewhere in the middle. Because it can't be. I see the word polarizing. It can be polarizing. People are going to continue to use these platforms. People are going to continue this gambling behavior. And so how do we work together to make it safer, to have protections in place? Do I think that the industry can do more? Absolutely. And we'll continue to have those conversations. But we can't stop the conversations. That's definitely not helpful.
Yeah. Chigbo, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's Jamie said it really well. We just have to understand each other's the different perspectives, have that civil discourse, open that door to the opportunity to hearing different perspectives. Like I mentioned about the unboxed group and whatnot, it's like people coming from other angles, and it's like, that's not collecting. It's like, that's collecting to them. This isn't harm, that's harm to them. Like there's a spectrum of all these things, right? We need to meet each other, in that discussion point and hear each other out, and not just say, I don't agree, I don't want to hear what you say, because we're not going to learn and grow in that sense. And, when engaging with the industry and operators, we need to understand to be sensitive to their perspectives. They have a business to run, and they also, they need to know the stories and hear the stories and the harm that is being caused in our communities, and how to, like you said, create some guardrails in a collaborative measure, that, we can at least come to a positive direction. If they're going to go in that way, we're going to go in this way. At least like maybe we can align in some areas that is going to be helpful to community. By us being siloed and separate, I believe that there's a less opportunity or less chance for there to, be beautiful and supportive things brought into our communities across the world. So,
yeah, you basically answered my last question on this segment, which was, there's a real finesse to this, right? It's a balancing act. Being honest about risk without shutting people down is really, really important. So how do you keep the doors open while, naming risks clearly? Did you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, just meeting people where they're at, on all sides of the spectrums, again, just listening it out, and then approaching from a position of care and compassion and the desire to help the situation. I think organizations and things that are designed to make money, they have an obligation to their stakeholders or whatnot. They want to make money, but I might be naive in my thought process here, but I think overall, as a human, as a community, world community, we don't really want to harm people. We want to, make a wage. We want to, live in a way that we can, but also do it in a way that's collaborative and not harmful to others. And I know, everybody will have their different perspective on that, especially those that have been deeply harmed, right? So we see people that come in and their lives have been destroyed, and they don't ever want to see the perspective from the operators or from some of these big name companies. And that's totally perfect for them. And then we understand that, but at the same time, we are in this world together, and we do need to figure out ways to make things better and safer for all human beings. And sometimes that means sitting at the table with, across the table with some folks, organizations that we don't necessarily agree with their tactics, but then also talking about ways to make it safer for the community. So keeping those doors open, and meeting people where they're at.
Yeah, that balance just feels so essential if the goal is, real engagement rather than defensiveness. So we're going to shift over to our final segment, which is what healthy collaboration looks like. And this is something that I think we've been talking about pretty much this entire segment, this entire episode. But when you think about collaboration between advocacy groups and collecting communities, what does healthy actually look like?
Yeah, I think part of healthy is understanding different stakeholder strengths, and then leaning on those strengths, because we as a coalition, we're not experts at everything. We don't do everything well, and so I think part of healthy collaboration is understanding strengths and being able to lean on those strengths, and that takes being honest with yourselves too, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and then identifying stakeholders that, and this is the hard part. Identifying stakeholders who are in it for the right reason. We are in a space, even the helping space, there's not always potential collaborators that are doing it for the right reasons. And that's hard because you have to kind of sift through that. You have to ask some of those hard questions, and really ensure that you have a similar mission in mind. So I think that's part of it too, just doing some level of due diligence to ensure that each of these partners are really doing it for the right reason.
Yeah, well said. And how can education evolve without sort of racing ahead of evidence?
That's an area that we are challenged with because there's not a lot of federal funding for research. And so, we pull from all the data points that we can, because we do have data points and we have information that we can pull from, and, but we can, we can't wait either. That's the challenge. And I know, even though something may feel like common sense, you still have to research it to prove it, right? But I think that there's so much work to do in this space that while we're still waiting for this research and advocating for the research, like there's still work that we know that we can do. We have enough data points to know kind of where the focus areas are. We know through decades of mental health research, addiction research, how to treat these challenges as well. And so I think we have enough for now. This is an ever evolving landscape too. And so, I do presentations all the time, and it's annoying, but I do it because I want to stay up to date. I'm having to change my slides every presentation because there's new information, new research. There's a change in the landscape. And so, even when we do have research, there's always going to be a lag too, and just being mindful of that as well. So we just do the best that we can, but I think we have enough for sure now to make educated and evidence-informed decisions.
Chigbo, you want to add anything there?
Oh, you said it perfectly, man.
Awesome. So last question, where do you see the most responsible next steps?
I mean, we are doing it, right? Like what we're doing right now is one of those next steps. We're kind of spearheading this space as far as spreading awareness in the collecting and gambling convergence areas, and really spreading the word across other states and across the nation, across the world. So to be responsible to our fellow neighbor, to our community members, means that we're going to do every possible effort that we can to make sure that that awareness is out there and that they have support systems. And that's what PGCC does. We listen to our community, we listen to their stories, and then we try to figure out ways to support what their experience had brought them to, right? We don't just say, hey, we only help gamblers that play poker or whatever the case is, because we know like there's all sorts of folks out there. So, continuing what we started here, Alyx. I mean, Collectors MD has done some wonderful work. We got Unbox going. We're spreading the word. People are hearing about it. There's folks online from other states. I'm sure, when it comes to that question to you, all you listeners, what are the responsible next steps? Maybe if you're in a state that doesn't have any of these support groups, you would reach out to a council or a coalition or a representative or a commissioner or something and say, hey, what are we doing for this? This is what I'm experiencing. This is my community experiencing, and we need supports. And so as human beings, we need to take up the responsibility also within ourselves and not just assume that the PGCCs of the world or the Collectors MDs of the world are going to do the work for us, or they're going to speak how we, speak to the things that matter to us. But obviously one way you can do it is to chime in to us, right? So we're specially positioned and empowered, especially as a state council, to bring these subjects and these matters to the desks and attention of people that do make changes within laws. And so we just need to be proactive on a macro level, on a on a micro level, to really make change and to spread the awareness. So I really love what we do as PGCC. That's why, I can't be grateful enough to be working here, because we're a nonprofit, we're state funded. Everything that we offer is free. We're passion driven, and we do it for the people. And you can't beat that. You just can't beat going out there and creating change for the world in a positive trajectory, and you meet a lot of wonderful people like yourself. So we all need to get out there and say something about it, and when we see it, point it out like Jamie did at the bingo stuff at his school. Have those small discussions that blow up into bigger discussions that actually make change.
Yeah, and I think
Well said,
in regards to our work together, continuing to refine what we're doing. I know we're looking to continue to make changes and adjustments in our work together. At some point, evaluate it as well, just to kind of show its effectiveness, and then offer it to others, right? And so, I'm really locked in and focused in building this product together, so that we can beta test it, make revisions to this, and then really hand it off to other people as a well thought out, refined system to help people.
Yeah. From our side, I feel like the most responsible next steps aren't necessarily about making or fixing everything or making these grand declarations. It's just really more about learning alongside each other, right? And change and evolution and how things are, or the direction things are headed in. I think where collaboration really works is in education and early intervention and shared language, and creating spaces where collectors can recognize the risks sooner, ask questions without fear of being labeled or being judged, and get connected to support before things escalate. And so partnering with PGCC on programs like Unboxed, training for councils and helpline staff, and co-developing neutral educational resources just all feels like the right pace. And it's at the end of the day, it's about building trust, testing what's helpful, and adjusting as we learn. Not rushing to conclusions, but also not waiting until harm is undeniable. And I think we found a really good balance there. So with that, we're gonna transition over to our final round. We'll call it the rapid fire round. I'm gonna ask you guys 5 questions. You're gonna hit me with your first thought, honest answer, and maybe we can get an answer to each of these questions from both of you. So the first one is most misunderstood aspect of gambling harm.
I would say initial thought that it's just financial, that this is a financial issue, because it affects so much more than financial. It's about the time that you're spending, how you feel when you gamble, what you're missing out on when you gamble, what other behaviors are you pairing it with? Are you also drinking because you're anxious about your bets? So it's not just a financial challenge.
Yeah, that it's not really that harmful because you could just stop.
Early signals someone might be struggling.
Isolation.
Yeah, isolation. That's a good one. Yeah, isolation, and yeah, that's a big one that we see. Like, I ditto isolation.
Yeah. One protective factor that makes a real difference.
Another human being.
I was going to say the opposite of isolation. We do a lot of community events that are very successful and popular in bringing people together and feeling part of a community. So being out there and being a part of something, doing social events, sober events, not gambling, getting together, being in a community.
One thing families often miss.
Finances. I have found in working with couples is that oftentimes it's just one person who manages the finances, and there's one person that's completely oblivious to the whole thing. And so, yeah, so I encourage spouses, even as a preventative measure, like have access and log into your bank account, know all your credit card balances, because it may not be gambling, it could be spending, overspending, it could be how they're spending, but I think that's often missed, and it's so easy to know that information. So, for the listeners, like, if you are in a relationship with someone, or even as a parent, like that financial transparency is really important.
Yeah, and I had time to think about this one, but it's just that it is a serious diagnosable thing, right? Like, it is an addiction. They think that maybe it's just a habit that could be stopped, as I mentioned in the first question. The misunderstood aspect of gambling harm is you could just stop. People need serious, trained, professional help in these spaces sometimes. And so, yeah.
Awesome. One more question. One thing that helps people feel less alone.
Connection. I think that was question number 3 that I answered, was just like being together, being like Collectors MD, Unboxed. We are a community that have shared experiences, and just coming together. Even folks that don't even say anything, they often chime in after, like, thank you, just being here was helpful, being with all you guys and listening to your stories. So definitely connection, getting out there, doing things together as a community in a safe manner.
Yeah, and I'll say peer support. If I hear one more person say, I got myself into this, so I'm have to get myself out of it by myself. Like, it's just the most annoying thing that I hear. So, I understand I'm a therapist. I work with people, but I'm limited in what I do, and so that's where that peer support is so crucial.
Yeah, gentlemen, I'll say it one more time for those listening. We cannot heal in isolation. We have to heal in community. Jamie, Chigbo, thank you both for this conversation. What really stands out is how much of this comes back to timing, language, and care. This isn't about policing hobbies or labeling people. It's about recognizing when environments change and making sure support systems change with them. One final question for you guys. If someone listening recognizes pieces of themselves in this conversation, what's one supportive step they can take without feeling judged or labeled?
Well, I mean, being the director of programs at PGCC, I'll say, like, reach out to us if you're a Coloradan. Even if you're not, we can connect you with local support systems in your area. But we have, we don't know who's listening out there. There might be clinicians, there might be peer support folks, there might be folks suffering with these challenges. But as far as PGCC is concerned, we offer access to free treatment. We give out scholarships for training. So if you want to learn more about all the stuff that we discussed about and whatnot, we will sponsor your training so that you can get formal education around these things. And that also includes support groups for family members as well. And we have informational groups, financial planning, access to all these wonderful things. So I say first step is just reach out to your local organization, social workers, case managers, anybody. Just reach out and try to get connected with organizations like ourselves wherever you're at.
Yeah, and I'll just plug cogamblerhelp.org and 800-GAMBLER. You can call or text that number. Those are 2 great resources.
Well said, gentlemen. Just wanted to thank you guys again. This was a really, really, I think, impactful conversation and is going to resonate with a lot of people. If this episode resonated with you, please make sure to subscribe, share it with someone who might find it useful, and help keep this conversation grounded and constructive. If you're feeling uncertain, overwhelmed, or stuck in a pattern you don't fully understand, Collectors MD and PGCC are both here as free resources. We host free weekly peer support meetings every Wednesday night from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern and a Thursday meeting from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern in partnership with PGCC called Unboxed, powered by Collectors MD. You can find all of our tools, resources, and support offerings at collectorsmd.com, and make sure to check out PGCC's website, cogamblerhelp.org, for additional resources. Be sure to subscribe to the Collectors Compass on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and all major platforms, and check out our other two shows, Behind the Breaks and Collectors MD Features. All details in the description below. I'm Alyx Efron. This is the Collectors Compass, reminding you to collect with intention, not compulsion. We'll see you next time.